My dear brother, my precious sister in Christ, what if I told you that the 30 seconds you spend each morning scrolling through your phone could instead be used to permanently break free from the suffocating cycle of borrowing money? I know that sounds almost impossible, especially if you've spent years caught in that trap of financial dependency. But stay with me here, because what you're about to discover has transformed the lives of thousands of people who once felt exactly the way you might be feeling right now. Think about the last time you had to ask someone for money. Do you remember that feeling? The way your heart started pounding before you even typed the first word. The way your hands trembled as you wrote and deleted the message over and over again, trying to find the right words that wouldn't make you sound desperate. That moment when you finally pressed send and immediately felt that wave of shame wash over you, wondering how you ended up in this situation again. Has this ever happened to you? If you're nodding your head right now, I want you to know that you're not alone. And more importantly, this pattern can be broken starting today. Dr. Joseph Murphy, one of the greatest minds in understanding the power of the subconscious mind and financial prosperity, discovered something remarkable that prosperous individuals have practiced for generations, but rarely talk about publicly. It's a simple yet profoundly powerful morning practice that takes just 30 seconds. No complicated rituals, no expensive e-courses, no mystical ceremonies, just 3 sentences spoken at a very specific time each day that can completely rewire your relationship with money at the deepest psychological level. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bells so you don't miss any of our future videos. Now, here's what most people don't understand about financial struggle. The real problem isn't actually the lack of money itself. I know that might sound strange when you're staring at an empty bank account or a pile of bills, but the truth is that debt and dependency are born from something much deeper, something that happens in those critical first moments after you wake up each morning. You see, every time you open your mouth to ask for money, you think you're just solving a temporary problem. But what's really happening is that you're sending a powerful signal to your subconscious mind. A signal that says, I cannot provide for myself. And when that signal gets repeated over and over, month after month, year after year, it creates an invisible mental pattern that keeps pulling you back into the same cycle, no matter how hard you work. What you're about to discover might surprise you because it goes against everything we've been taught about money and success. This isn't about working harder or finding a better job or waiting for some lucky break. This is about understanding that your morning words are actually programming your financial reality in ways you've never been taught to recognize. Think about this for a moment. In the exact amount of time it takes you to let out that anxious sigh before typing a message asking to borrow money, you could instead speak something so powerful that it begins to close the door on debt and swing open the door to a completely different kind of provision. 30 seconds. That's all we're talking about here. Not 30 minutes of meditation. Not some hour long ritual that requires you to wake up at dawn with candles and incense. Just 30 seconds that could mark the turning point between a life of financial dependency and a life of genuine abundance. Now, I know what you might be thinking right now. You've probably heard about affirmations before. Maybe you've even tried them and felt like, why it didn't work? Maybe you stood in front of a mirror telling yourself you're wealthy while your bank account was screaming the opposite, and it just felt empty and fake. I completely understand that skepticism, because here's the hidden truth that most people miss. It's not just about what you say. It's about when you say it and how those words interact with your subconscious mind during that critical window of opportunity. Dr. Joseph Murphy spent decades researching the mechanics of the subconscious mind and financial consciousness. And what he discovered was revolutionary. There's a specific moment each day when your mind is in a unique state, a state where it's incredibly receptive to new programming, where the barriers between your conscious thoughts and your deeper beliefs are at their thinnest. This moment happens right after you wake up, before you've fully transitioned into your everyday thinking patterns, before you've checked your phone, before you've let the worries of the day flood in that precious window. Your subconscious is essentially waiting for instructions on how to operate for the next 24 hours. And here's where the real transformation happens. This practice I'm sharing with you isn't some complicated spiritual ceremony that requires years of study or special knowledge. It's 3 sentences. That's it. 3 carefully constructed sentences that, when spoken in that morning window, begin to reprogram the deepest patterns in your mind around money worthiness and provision. You don't need to understand quantum physics or ancient wisdom traditions. You don't need to fast or make lifelong vows or change your entire lifestyle. You just need to be willing to give 30 seconds of your morning to something different than what you've been doing, because what you've been doing has led you to where you are right now. If this resonates with you, subscribe to the channel right now. This is where we dive into principles that actually transform your financial reality, not just temporary motivation. The beauty of this practice lies in its simplicity. But don't mistake simplicity for weakness. Some of the most powerful forces in nature are elegantly simple. Water flowing downhill will eventually carve through solid rock, not through complexity, but through consistent directed pressure over time. That's exactly what these 30 seconds do. They create a new groove in your consciousness, a new pathway that your thoughts about money can flow through. With each morning that you practice this, that pathway becomes deeper, stronger, more automatic. Now, I want to go even deeper into why this specific timing matters so much and what's actually happening in your brain during those first moments of consciousness. You see, when you wake up, your brain is transitioning from theta waves to alpha waves. And this transition creates what neuroscientists call a hypnagogic state. In this state, your critical faculty, that part of your mind that constantly judges and filters information, is still mostly offline. This means that whatever you feed your mind during these moments doesn't get argued with or doubted. It goes straight into your subconscious programming. Most people waste this precious state by immediately grabbing their phone and filling their mind with emails, news, social media, all the external chaos that tells them they're not enough. They don't have enough. They need to be worried. But what if instead you claim those 30 seconds for yourself, for your financial transformation, for breaking free from patterns that have held you hostage? This is the decision point that separates those who transform their financial reality from those who stay stuck in the same cycles year after year. It's not about your income level, your education, or your circumstances. It's about whether you're willing to take control of the most powerful moment of your day and use it intentionally. Write in the comments, I'm ready for this transformation. And here's where the real magic of this practice reveals itself. The key is in the sequence, in the order of operations that most people get completely backwards. Think about what you do right now. When you wake up, your eyes open, and within seconds, maybe even before your feet touch the floor, your hand is reaching for your phone. You're checking messages, scrolling through notifications, and almost inevitably, you are looking at your bank balance with that familiar knot forming in your stomach. That discouraging number stares back at you. And before you've even fully woken up, fear has already taken residence in your mind for the day. This is the pattern that keeps you trapped. But what if you flip that script entirely? What if before your hand ever touched that phone, before you gave fear permission to dictate your emotional state, before you allowed that bank balance to define your worth for the next 24 hours, you stood up and spoke those 3 sentences. This isn't just some feel-good strategy. This is about claiming authority over your own mental space before the world rushes in to tell you who you are and what you lack. When you make this practice non-negotiable, when you protect those 30 seconds as sacred time before anything else enters your consciousness, something measurable begins to shift in the flow of provision around you. Now, I need to be crystal clear about something because I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying here. This isn't about sitting on your couch speaking these words and then passively waiting for money to magically appear in your mailbox. That's not how this works. And anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you fantasy. What actually happens is far more interesting and far more powerful. When you reset your morning frequency through this practice, when you program your subconscious with a message of provision rather than lack, you become a different kind of person energetically and mentally. You start noticing opportunities that were always there, but that your scarcity mindset had blinded you to. Doors begin opening in ways that feel almost uncanny in their timing. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in real life. Maybe it's a customer you haven't heard from in months who suddenly calls with a project. Maybe it's a conversation at the grocery store that turns into a collaboration opportunity no one could have predicted. Maybe it's an idea that hits you in the shower, an idea so clear and actionable that when you implement it, it creates an entirely new revenue stream. These aren't coincidences. These are the natural results of aligning your internal state with abundance rather than desperation. When you're operating from desperation, people can sense it. Opportunities repel away from you, and you make decisions from fear rather than wisdom. But when you've anchored yourself each morning in a consciousness of provision, you move through the world differently. You speak differently. You show up differently and the world responds to that difference. This is the hidden truth about financial transformation that no one talks about in those get rich schemes or money manifestation courses. Real change doesn't come from external manipulation. It comes from internal revolution, from making a decision each morning about who you're going to be before the day has a chance to tell you who you should be. The journey from financial anxiety to genuine abundance isn't a straight line, but it starts with this single pivot point. This choice to claim your morning as your own. Write in the comments, I choose abundance today. What I'm about to share with you might sound radical, but I need you to really absorb this because it's the core of everything. Your financial reality isn't actually determined by your job, your education, or even the economy. It's determined by your identity, by the person you believe yourself to be when you first open your eyes each morning. Right now, if you're stuck in that borrowing cycle, you're waking up each day as someone who thinks, here we go again. Another day of being short, another day of struggling, another day of not having enough. That's not just a thought. That's an identity. And your subconscious mind, which controls about 95% of your daily behaviors and decisions, takes that identity as an instruction manual for how to operate. But imagine something completely different. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and instead of immediately slipping into that familiar costume of lack, you stand up and declare with your own voice, today I'm a channel of abundant provision. Not as a hope, not as a wish, but as a statement of fact about who you are. This isn't playing pretend or lying to yourself. This is about understanding that identity is a choice, not a fixed reality. You weren't born with a label stamped on your forehead that says financially struggling person. That identity was constructed over time through repetition, through the stories you've told yourself, through the words you've spoken every single morning. And here's the revelation that changes everything. If that identity was constructed, it can be deconstructed and rebuilt. The shift from I'm someone who's always short to I'm a channel of provision might seem like just semantics, like we're playing word games here. But the impact on your neural pathways is profound. Your brain literally cannot tell the difference between a vividly imagined reality and an actual one. When you declare a new identity with conviction, especially in that receptive morning state, your subconscious begins reorganizing your perception, your attention, and your actions to align with that declaration. You start seeing possibilities that were invisible before. You start having conversations you would have avoided. You start making decisions from a place of empowerment rather than desperation. And here's what I need you to understand with absolute clarity. That cycle you've been trapped in. Those 300 a.m. nights lying awake in anxiety. That awful feeling of avoiding people because you owe them money. That humiliating mental loop of who can I ask this time? And what excuse sounds believable? All of that can end right here, right now. In this moment, if you make the decision, not tomorrow when you feel more ready, not next week when things calm down, not next month when you think you'll have more willpower. Now, because every day you delay is another day of programming, that old identity deeper into your mind, another day of that neural pathway getting stronger. Another day of opportunities passing by that you can't see because you're looking through the lens of lack. The decision to break free isn't something that happens when conditions are perfect. It happens when you decide that staying the same is no longer acceptable. When the pain of remaining stuck becomes greater than the fear of change. When you finally say enough is enough and claim a different story for your life, write in the comments, I'm breaking the cycle. Now let me share something with you that might give you the evidence you need to truly believe this is possible for you. 2, I've witnessed this transformation in real people, not celebrities or business mogul, but ordinary individuals just like you and me. I'm talking about construction workers who are borrowing $300 every month just to cover rent. Single mothers working 2 jobs who still came up short on school fees and had to ask family members for help with that familiar sense of shame burning in their chest. Office workers with decent salaries who somehow always needed to borrow $100 here, $200 there just to make it through the month. Small shop owners who were one bad week away from having to close their doors and ask for money just to keep the lights on. These weren't people with character flaws or laziness problem snorts. They were hardworking, responsible individuals whose had simply been caught in an enviable web, a pattern that kept repeating no matter how hard they tried to escape it. And then something shifted. They started practicing this 30-second morning declaration with genuine consistency. And I want to emphasize this because it's crucial. There were no lottery tickets involved, no rich relatives passing away and leaving them inheritance. No sudden lucky breaks or magical interventions where cash just appeared out of nowhere. What happened was far more profound and sustainable than any of that. What changed was a habit, a simple, deliberate habit of speaking 3 specific sentences every single morning before doing anything else. 7 days turned into 21 days. 21 days turned into 40 days. And somewhere along that journey, their internal wiring started to shift. The people who once couldn't make it through a month without borrowing gradually became people who not only stopped needing to ask for money, but actually found themselves in positions where they could help others who were struggling the same way they once had. That's the real measure of transformation, when you go from being the one who needs rescue to being the one who can extend a hand to someone else. This didn't happen because they suddenly got promoted or won contracts worth millions. It happened because their relationship with money fundamentally changed at the clearest throat identity level. They stopped operating from scarcity and started operating from a consciousness of provision. And when that internal shift occurs, your external reality has no choice but to reorganize itself to match. Opportunities that were always there but invisible suddenly become clear. Decisions that you would have made from fear and desperation get made from wisdom and clarity. Instead, conversations happen differently. Relationships shift. The energy you bring into every interaction changes, and people respond to that energy in ways that open doors you didn't even know existed. The beauty of this approach is in its accessibility. You don't need special circumstances or perfect conditions to start. You just need to commit to those 30 seconds every morning and trust the process enough to stay consistent through the critical threshold periods of 7 days, 21 days, and 40 days. This is where most people fail, not because the practice doesn't work, but because they give up before the neural pathways have had time to solidify. Write in the comments, I commit to 40 days. Understanding why people get stuck in borrowing cycles is essential, because without this insight, you might blame yourself for something that was never really about your character or work ethic in the first place. The individuals I've seen transform weren't lazy. They weren't irresponsible with money. They weren't making poor decisions out of carelessness. They were caught in something far more insidious, an invisible pattern that operates below the level of conscious awareness. Here's how it works. The first time you borrow money, it feels terrible, embarrassing, like a failure, but you get through it. And that temporary relief creates a neural pathway. The second time becomes slightly easier because your brain recognizes the pattern. The third time, easier still. And before you realize what's happening, borrowing has become your default solution to financial pressure. The more you borrow, the more dependent you become on that external rescue. The more dependent you become, the weaker your internal sense of financial capability feels. And the weaker you feel, the easier it becomes to ask again, because you've already crossed the threshold of dignity so many times that it doesn't sting quite as much anymore. This is the trap. It's not about the money itself. It's about the pattern slowly rewiring your identity from someone who solves problems to someone who needs to be saved from them. Breaking this pattern requires more than just willpower or a sudden influx of cash. It requires interrupting the cycle at its source. Abue-ish is the mental and emotional programming that runs automatically every single morning. What fascinates me most about this practice is its historical depth. Dr. Joseph Murphy didn't invent these principles out of thin air. He studied wisdom that has been carefully preserved and passed down through generations of prosperous families for literally thousands of years. We're talking about practices that have survived wars, economic collapses, cultural upheavals, and every kind of adversity imaginable. These families didn't advertise their methods on billboards or social media. They didn't write best-selling books about their secrets. They quietly practiced certain morning rituals related to money, dignity, and provision. And the results spoke for themselves in ways that were undeniable, yet often invisible to outsiders. Think about what that means for a moment. While most of the world was taught to work harder, save more, and hope for the best, there was a smaller group of people who understood something deeper about how financial reality actually gets created. They knew that prosperity isn't just about external actions. It's about internal alignment. They knew that what you declare about yourself in those sacred morning moments has more power than how many hours you work or how much you sacrifice. And they protected this knowledge, passed it down carefully, used it generation after generation to rebuild wealth, even when everything external was taken from them. The revelation here is that this wisdom isn't locked away anymore. You don't need to be born into these families or discover some hidden manuscript. The principles are accessible right now, and the practice is simple enough that anyone can begin immediately. Write in the comments, I'm claiming this wisdom. What's truly remarkable when you look at history through this lens is how certain communities faced absolute devastation, had everything stripped away from them, endured exile, war, persecution, complete financial ruin, and yet within a generation or two, they rebuilt extraordinary wealth. How is that possible? How do people lose everything and then rise again stronger than before, while others who've never faced such hardship remain your mouth and declare independence from the pattern of borrowing, begging, and luring yourself? Think about what it means to stand upright. It's not just a physical posture. It's a mental and spiritual posture. It's refusing to bow down to circumstances. It's refusing to accept that you're somehow less worthy of provision than anyone else. It's recognizing that the same creative power that built fortunes for others is available to you right now in this moment, waiting to be activated by your declaration. The revelation here is that you're not asking permission from the universe or from some external authority. You're claiming what's already yours by right of your existence as a conscious being with the power to speak your reality into form. This shifts everything because it means you're no longer waiting to be rescued or hoping someone will give you a break. You're stepping into the role of creator of your own financial experience. And that role begins every single morning with the words you choose to speak before anything else enters your consciousness. Right in the comments, I claim my dignity now. Now I need you to really sit with something uncomfortable for a moment, because this awareness is where the real breakthrough begins. Every time you've opened your mouth to ask someone for money, you thought you were just solving a temporary cash flow problem. You needed to cover rent, pay a bill, get through the week. It seemed practical, even necessary, but here's what was actually happening at the level you couldn't see. You were making a declaration to your subconscious mind. And that declaration said, I cannot manage my own life. I am not capable of providing for myself. I need someone else to rescue me. Now, before you feel defensive or ashamed about this, understand that I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I'm saying it so you can finally see the invisible mechanism that's been running your financial reality. Your subconscious doesn't judge these declarations as good or bad. It simply accepts them as truth and then organizes your entire neurological system to make that truth consistent. So when you repeatedly declare through your actions and words that you cannot manage, your brain starts looking for evidence to support that belief. It filters out opportunities that would contradict it. It guides you towards situations that confirm it. It creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where the more you borrow, the more you become someone who borrows. And the more you become someone who borrows, the more circumstances arise that require you to borrow again. This is the binding power of words. And most people have no idea they're doing this to themselves. But here's where hope enters the picture. And it's not just wishful thinking hope, but actual, tangible, scientifically valid hope. The same mechanism that bound you can set you free. If your mouth speaking words of dependency created a reality of debt, then your mouth speaking words of provision can create a reality of abundance. This isn't metaphorical. This is how the human nervous system actually works. Your words, especially those spoken in heightened emotional states or in that receptive morning consciousness, literally program your reticular activating system, the part of your brain that determines what you pay attention to and what you ignore in your environment. When you shift from speaking dependency to declaring provision, you're not just being positive or trying to trick yourself into feeling better. You're actually rewiring the filtering system that determines what opportunities you notice, what connections you make, what ideas come to you, and how other people perceive and respond to you. This is the hidden power that's been available to you all along. You've been using your mouth as a creative tool your entire life, but you've been creating the wrong reality because no one taught you how this actually works. The moment you take conscious control of this pause, the moment you decide that your morning words will be declarations of provision rather than unconscious confirmations of lack, everything begins to shift. Write in the comments, my words create my reality. Before we go any further, I want to make something absolutely clear, because your level of commitment will determine whether this works for you or becomes just another thing you tried once and abandoned. This isn't a casual experiment. This isn't something you do for 3 days to see if money magically appears and then give up when it doesn't happen on your timeline. This is a journey to restore something that's been taken from you. Something you may not have even realized was missing, your financial dignity. And that restoration requires a different level of commitment than you've brought to most things in your life. Think about it this way. You didn't develop your current financial patterns overnight. They were built layer by layer, word by word, decision by decision over months and years and maybe even decades. Those neural pathways are deep and well-worn. So when you decide to create new pathways, when you decide to reprogram your subconscious relationship with money, you're not flipping a light switch. You're building new roads in your brain. And roads get built through repetition, through showing up consistently, through refusing to quit when the old patterns try to pull you back. This is why having a daily reminder system becomes absolutely essential. Your environment is designed to pull you back into old patterns. Your phone notifications want to drag you into anxiety. Your bank balance wants to define your worth. The people around you who are comfortable with you staying small will unconsciously try to keep you there without a deliberate system to remind yourself each day of who you're becoming. Without something that anchors you back to this new identity you're building, the gravitational pull of the old life becomes overwhelming. You need something that wakes you up every morning and then says, you were not born to be a slave to debt. You were not created to live with your head down in shame, avoiding eye contact with people you owe money to. You were designed to walk tall in provision, to be a conduit through which abundance flows not just to you, but through you to others. This isn't motivational fluff. This is the truth about your nature that's been buried under layers of conditioning and disappointment and repeated failures. The daily reminder system isn't about pumping yourself up with fake positivity. It's about maintaining the new mental patterns long enough for them to become automatic, for them to replace the old programming that's been running your life. Dr. Murphy understood that transformation happens in the gap between decision and integration. You can make a powerful decision right now to change, but if you don't have a structure to support that decision through the messy middle part, where nothing seems to be working yet, you'll fall back into default patterns within days. The daily reinforcement is what carries you across that gap until the new way of being becomes natural. Write in the comments, I'm building new patterns. So right now, in this exact moment, I want you to pause and ask yourself a question that might be uncomfortable, but absolutely necessary. Are you willing to live another full year the way you've been living? Are you willing to spend the next 3 years, maybe even 5 years, continuing to send those borrowing messages with shaking hands? Are you willing to keep having those awkward phone calls where you try to sound casual while asking for money? Are you willing to keep experiencing those sleepless nights at 3 daindro in the morning, staring at the ceiling, running through the mental list of who you could possibly ask next? And what excuse might sound believable this time if the answer that's rising up in your chest right now is no? If you feel that resistance, that anger, that exhaustion with T-current pattern, then that feeling is actually your signal to commit, not to think about it, not to wait until you feel more prepared or more worthy. Ain is literally wired to look outward for rescue rather than inward for resourcefulness. Understanding this changes everything, because it means you're not fighting against your circumstances or your bad luck. You're fighting against your own neurology, and you can't win that fight with willpower alone. You need to rewire the pathways. And that rewiring happens through consistent morning declaration that creates new neural networks stronger than the old ones. Write in the comments, I'm rewiring my brain now. Ancient wisdom understood something about borrowing that modern society has completely forgotten. And it's captured in one simple but profound observation. The one who borrows becomes a servant to the lender. Not temporarily, not just until the debt is repaid. In that moment of asking, in that transaction where you extend your hand for rescue, something shifts in the power dynamic that goes far beyond the financial exchange. You place yourself in a subordinate position energetically, psychologically, and spiritually. Borrowing doesn't just restrict your finances by adding another obligation to your list. It imprisons your identity. It changes how you carry yourself in the world. Think about how you feel when you see someone you owe money to. That slight contraction in your chest, that impulse to avoid eye contact or change your path, that sense of being smaller, less than indebted, not just financially, but existentially. That's your energetic presence being compromised. You can't show up powerfully in the world when you're walking around carrying invisible chains of debt that remind you with every encounter that you're someone who needed rescue. This is why breaking free from borrowing isn't just about getting your finances in order. It's about reclaiming your sovereign identity, your right to walk through the world with your head up, your energy expansive, your presence uncompromised by the weight of owing others. And that reclamation begins not with paying off every debt, which could take years, but with changing the declaration you make every single morning about who you are and how provision flows to you. When you stand in that morning light and recite those 3 sentences, you need to understand what's actually happening. You're not just praying in the traditional sense of asking some external power for help. You're issuing a divine decree. You're speaking with the authority of someone who understands they have creative power with the universe. You're announcing to every level of reality, seen and unseen, conscious and subconscious, that you are no longer available for the old pattern. You're declaring a new identity into existence. And that declaration carries weight because it's being spoken from the deepest part of your being in the most receptive moment of the day. This is simultaneously a spiritual practice and a neurological reboot. You're reformatting your mental hard drive and installing new operating instructions. And here's what's beautiful and terrifying about this. Once your language genuinely shifts, once you consistently speak provision instead of lack, independence instead of dependency, worthiness instead of shame, your life has absolutely no choice but to you follow. Reality rearranges itself to match your declaration because you've changed the frequency you're broadcasting. Write in the comments, I issue my decree today. So here we are at the end of this conversation. And if you're still with me right now, that tells me something important about you. You're not just casually browsing content. You're genuinely ready for change. You're someone who's willing to sit through truth even when it's uncomfortable, because you know that comfort is what's kept you stuck. I want you to know that this channel exists for people exactly like you. People who are done with surface level advice and ready for the kind of transformation that actually rewires how you think, speak, and show up in the world. If the T resonates with you, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. Because I need another number. Because you need a consistent place that reminds you daily of the power you carry and the financial dignity that's your birthright. And if this message landed in your spirit the way I think it did, drop a comment right now that says, this message was meant for me. I read every single comment, and there's something powerful about publicly declaring your commitment to this journey. It makes it real in a way that silent agreement never does. If you found value here, if something clicked into place while you were listening, go ahead and leave a like on this video. It helps this message reach others who are trapped in the same cycles you're breaking free from. And honestly, it lets me know this conversation mattered to you. Now, there's another video right here that goes even deeper into how to maintain this transformation once you've started it. How to handle the moments when the old patterns try to pull you back. Click on it and continue this journey with me over there. Your financial breakthrough is waiting, and it starts with the next 30 seconds of tomorrow morning. I'll see you in the next